Well, greetings and welcome, ladies and gentlemen, to our very first Chris, Gregg, and Brook Reinoehl Leadership Podcast. My name is Brook Reinoehl, and I'm here locally in Clay Community with the McKinley Hill Church. I also serve with an organization called Game Time Leadership, which I developed to help raise leadership awareness in our community and really help people recognize their own potential and overcome limitations to kind of moving into the kind of life that people want to have and can lead well with. And I'm joined by my good friend, Chris Gregg. Chris?
Hi, I'm Chris Gregg. I'm the senior minister at First Christian Church, and I'm just really excited to be a part of this leadership podcast. I've been kind of a student of leadership for about 30 years, reading books and just studying and watching, and I'm just so excited about leadership.
Yeah, it's awesome. I'm glad to be with you as well. I know we share a lot of connections in leadership through the community, so this should be a lot of fun for us to do. It should really be beneficial. And I know you're kind of stoked up today. You seem to be a little energetic, so I'm looking forward to the time with you today. I'm going to begin by just telling you the way this is going to work is I will ask questions of Chris. He's going to answer the questions, and then we will have a little bit of dialogue around those questions that can pertain to what we're learning about leadership. And episodes will be released every second Thursday of the month. So we want you to watch for that. It'll be coming around at that frequency. And check us out, like everything, and get involved with us. Today's topic for our podcast is leadership to us. What is leadership to us? It's a good place to start because you'll learn our philosophy a little bit and what we think about leadership. So our first question today, Chris, for you is what does the word leadership mean to you when it comes to anything from business to church work to sports? What does leadership mean to you?
Well, Brooke, when I think about leadership, I think about influence, and the person that really kind of influenced me in leadership was John Maxwell when he said, leadership is influence. Otherwise, you want to walk with a group toward a direction or toward a goal, and otherwise, if you're not leading and if you're not influencing, you're walking alone.
I agree. I think John has had a great impact on the world, really, through his thoughts about influence. When I think about that, it raises the question in my mind, when we come into a situation to lead or we accept the responsibility for leadership, do you think influence comes more through us looking at a group and trying to influence that dynamic? In other words, we're proactively looking to influence people, or do you think it's more of an internal quality that we have walked with, influencing ourselves and becoming the kind of person that when we walk into the room, our standard of influence and leadership is so high that people just say, this is an influencer, I want to get behind them. Do you think it's more one of the other, a mix of both? I don't know if that's clear. But
That's a hard question because when I enter a room, I want to engage as many people as I possibly can personally to grow influence, and that just in a relational, individual dynamic. The other aspect of that as a leader, some people are born leaders and others learn leadership, and I think most people that maybe have the spiritual gift of leadership probably still, I think they still have to work at it and develop it, just like anyone else would from scratch. But the real thing about leadership is that it can be developed and it is relational. But I think some people that are leadership gifted, when you stand in a room, other people notice that you're standing and looking like a leader. I was interested. We were out in Pendleton, California. Make a long story quick. We were at church at a pillar church off the Pendleton Marine Corps base, and a bunch of young Marines. And I was helping. Basically, they'd set up this church in a school, so they had to move chairs and tables and all kinds of things. And I was standing in the room helping out, and a couple of the young Marines asked my son, who was a lieutenant at the time, was his dad a Marine? Was he a former officer? And he said, no. Why? And he said, well, he just looks like a leader. And I think some people exude, I don't know that I do, but these young Marines thought I was an officer, but by the way I stood. And I never really, your question actually made me think of that story. And I don't think I've ever told that story before, but it was just an odd situation. And it, I guess you can look like a leader. I don't know.
Yeah, I tend to think it's a little bit of both. You're looking constantly at how you're leading yourself, and regardless of whether you're leading people or trying to influence a group, you want to be able to look at both aspects, because you want to be growing as a leader no matter what, but then there is a time when you engage and you say, I really need to influence these people in order to create the result.
Well, I wasn't practicing any leadership in that moment. I was just helping out and watching people do their thing.
Well, let's talk about when leaders do get involved, they make progress. People look at leaders and say, leadership is influence, but that influence creates a result. I have a question. How much do you think progress is the mark of a leader?
I think progress is a mark of leadership. I think that we lead by that core character and example. First of all, I think you have to have a core of integrity and character.
Your answer there is interesting to me, because when I'm thinking about this question, I'm hearing you talk, I'm thinking about the fact that I've been through seasons in my own life where I wasn't really helping the organization produce a lot because we were in a real situation where I needed to grow. Mm-hmm. And that led me to say, if we're going to produce a result, I've got to become a better leader. I've got to grow in certain areas. And when you talk about those guys, they had leadership qualities, they had influence, but they weren't leading in a way that they were growing in their own quality of character. And I just wanted to ask you about that, because I think progress is the goal, but sometimes it's the progress of the leader, I guess, from my own experience, that needs to happen if the organization can bear with that person. But there is always some sort of progress going on.
I think you're right. I think that growth occurs, we have to grow ourselves or be mentored, choose specifically someone to mentor us, and we can hit plateaus. I can't say the word. Yeah. We can hit plateaus where we're not actually growing, and maybe, hopefully, if we keep at it and keep reading and keep listening and keep watching, then we'll break through that plateau. But I think there's seasons like that where I think in church growth and in organizational growth, you're going to hit a plateau. Something's got to change. It's the leader's responsibility to gather the right people around the table to help figure out what that is. What do we need to do? And it may be a quality, and a lot of times it's a quality situation. It's not a quantity, it's a quality situation.
That leads to another question. What does qualify a leader, in your opinion? If you're thinking of giving a trait or a skill or something that qualifies a leader, what would you say qualifies?
I think top three would be character, integrity, and passion. I think there has to be an energy toward whatever organization, church, business, whatever you're going to do. There has to be that passion that you want it to grow, you want to make things better, you want to make changes that'll make a difference.
That's really interesting to me. I wouldn't have thought of passion as being a qualifier, but that makes a lot of sense to me. I have seen very few effective leaders that, I don't know that I've seen any, that didn't have that internal burning passion for that result that they were going for. And so that's a real good answer. I appreciate you giving that input. I wanted to ask you, do you have to is it a requirement or a prerequisite to be a good follower first before you can be a good leader? Because when I think of what qualifies a leader, I think most leaders, hopefully at some point, understand followership by having been a good follower. What do you think about that?
I think so. I think my experience in youth ministry and having other leaders to follow and understanding the chain of command and learning. You can learn from a good leader or you can learn from a bad leader. And a lot of great leaders have been made through bad leadership examples because they've chosen to go a different direction.
Yeah. One other thing that comes up, and not from anything you've said, but just as I thought about this question, and I wondered, does a leader qualify himself or herself in the fact that we start, I think of it like baseball is one of the ways I like to think of it. When we stand in the batter's box, the first thing we have to do is get a hit, and we have to do things right in that first stage. I think the first stage is our home life, and doing that well, you don't have to do it well, but I think it sets you up for when you hit the ball, and you may have a life longevity, like a line of leadership around the bases, but I think when you come back home as a leader, it's almost like when it's just you and your family or you and the work you've done, you kind of qualify yourself there, don't you? Because if 100,000 or 1,000,000 people qualify you out on the bases, but you get home and recognize, I missed that first stage, I think that can hurt you qualifying yourself as a leader. But I don't know if that's a question, but I was just thinking about that. I don't know if you have any input there.
I think the home is really important. I think the Fortune 500 leaders, those that have excelled, I think of Bill Gates and Melinda Gates, they all have good family lives. They have good relationships with their spouses. And I think one of the main indicators is emotional intelligence. You marry somebody that's opposite of you, and that relationship builds and spreads throughout your life and career. And so if you can't get along at home, there are going to be a section of people that you probably can't get along with in the workforce or in your organization. And so that's a key characteristic. I also think that friction at home carries on into the work too. So I think that home plate ought to be taken care of first thing, and then raising children is another way of mentoring and coaching and loving people. All of those things are key components in a home life.
So the leadership qualities that you need out, around the bases are necessary at home as well. So it kind of gives you that
faithfulness, loyalty, consistency, love, respect. Key characteristics.
They give you not only working ground, but they qualify you as well. I wanted to ask you, what's a most important tool for a leader? If you were to just say, if I were going to tell people, here's a tool that makes you a good leader, what tool would you say, or tools would you say make good tools for a leader?
That's a good question. What makes a good...
Yeah, what tools do leaders use to be effective? Do they have to have a certain tool set to do well, to create change or to lead change? Do they have to have a certain tool set to manage the day-to-day problems? Do they have to have a certain tool set to just sustain themselves as a leader?
I think an emphasis on growing and learning, an emphasis on relationships and love and care, treating people like you'd want to be treated, the golden rule, also having some focus and some vision and some goals would be some key things. But the key thing is to continue to grow and learn and to listen to people respectfully. Some of those are, I think, key tools. What do you think?
How do you, I'll answer that in a minute. How do you go about personal growth or growing yourself, continuing to be in that mindset? How do you do that?
Well, first of all, I just love to learn. I'm reading some really interesting books that I'm really excited about right now. One's on game theory, and you might not think a preacher would get into this, but this is by a world-class poker player that's won $4 to $5 million. But it's all about decision making without all the information. So I'm passionate about learning. I also, when we run into obstacles and problem solving, I want to learn how to do that well. How do I incorporate others? How do I collaborate better? Where are my deficiencies? Where are my strengths? How do I leverage those and overcome those? And so having a mentor, having good friends that will tell me the truth and evaluate me in a positive way, like joining Toastmasters for me, public speaking was a weakness for me, and Toastmasters has really helped me and to excel in that area. I think you've got to grow yourself, and as you grow yourself and encourage others to be hopeful and realize, hey, they can do it too.
I think that's an important point, especially when you talked about not having all the information. A leader never has all the information, and so you can wait too long in trying to find all the information. You never know what everybody's completely thinking, and you've got to have that fine line. It is a good skill or a good tool to be able to make that decision without having all the information and knowing the timing of when to do that. It's a really good point. I was just thinking that leading people to and through change is a real coveted skill set when it comes to leadership. If you can't lead people to change and through change, you're going to have a hard time really staying in the leadership role. And that's something that, of course, it takes time to learn to do that, and how, a lot of learning, continued growth and development. But I believe that's really a skill or a tool that's helpful for leaders.
Yeah, I think going through change, communication is the key. Helping people understand what the purpose is, having a common vision, explaining and bringing them through the process collaboratively. And here's the goal, and here's what we want to do, and we're not going to leave anybody behind. Sharing that, having a understanding of how this is going to affect people, and working through processes like we've done a lot of change here, but it's been slow, intentional, purposeful. And most people, when it's a positive change and it impacts them positively, they hardly even notice it. And that's what's been amazing to me. We've about changed everything around here, and people haven't reacted to hardly anything. And so it's just how you do change, who you bring along, and bringing your formal and informal leadership along, make sure everybody's on board. And that doesn't mean we always agree, but it does mean that they come with us. But it takes time and relationships and vision.
One last comment I have on that particular answer is, it sounds to me like you accept as a leader, and one of the tools you have to have is a mindset that nothing's impossible, that we can figure out how to do this together, that I'm not going to give up because there's probably 50 ways to do it. We just have to find out how to do it and the best way to do it. And it sounds to me like you have that mentality of there's no shortage here. We can figure, there's enough there for us to figure out.
Well, from church world, we believe God's provided all that we need, and will provide all that we need. And sometimes it's just crazy wild that we don't have it, and all of a sudden it shows up. We'll ask and say, hey, here's something, and all of a sudden, hey, here's what we can do. And it happens. But when you have the right people in a diversity and collaborative spirit, positive and a loving spirit, man, all kinds of things can happen.
Awesome. I'm going to kind of ask one more question for us to talk about today and the time we have left, and that would be this: why do we need leadership?
I think everything rises and falls on leadership. I think as a leader gets better qualitatively, everything gets better. And it's so very important for leaders to grow their leadership. It's important for our churches, our organizations, our businesses to have that kind of leadership. Our communities will thrive with leadership. State government, federal government, craving leadership. There can never be too many leaders.
The leadership dynamic is just crazy to me, how you think about different generations. And so the quality of leadership that we produce does help those coming after us. Mm-hmm. But at the end of the day, each generation has to rise up and lead, given what the context they receive and how they deal with it, the different thinking that they come into life with, how they see things. They've got to raise up leaders within their own generation. There's always an ebb and flow, always a pendulum swinging. And leadership, to me, is super valuable because you're always going to need it, because there's just a different class or crop of people coming forward to do their work in the world. And that generational, transition to me is really important. In fact, our producer here, John Rhodes, behind the scenes here, has been helping us get this set up and has graciously set this up for us. I'm going to bring him in on this one and just ask him, as he looks as a young leader at leadership, who's gone before him, why do you think, John, that leadership's so important, and why is it so needed?
I just think that leadership really brings the team together. I think that all throughout the world and in our lives there are teams, whether it's a married couple team or it's a business team or it's a sports team. And I think that one leader, like Chris said, everything kind of rises and falls with that leader. And I think Chris is right when he says that good leaders can be born out of bad leaders, but having an exceptional leader, having a great leader as in charge of that team or on that team, really just, it builds the team up, but it also builds up leaders inside the team. And like Chris said, when you have leaders, when you have more than one leader, that's even better too, because a true leader is able to be humble and listen to others, but also lead. So I think just everything gets better when you have a good, strong leader. And really, as a Christian and as somebody who wants to see this community grow, I want to see everything get better. And so the more leaders we have in this community and in America and in the world, the better place it'll be for the people who come after us.
That's a great insight there about, leaders and just want to make things better for others. And we've all had leaders in our lives who have done that for us. They've lifted us because they invested in being good influencers and good leaders. I think as far as our time goes, we're almost to the end. Do you have anything else you want to add before I kind of wrap this up today as far as what we've talked about? Anything else you'd want to interject on leadership?
I'm just real excited that we're going to get to spend some time and talk about some things. And I'm not great at everything. I'm learning a lot about leadership as I grow. And I'm just real excited about what we're doing. And I hope you'll join us and enjoy the podcast. And if you got questions, I hope you'll either like us or comment, and we'd love to answer them. Or if you have some topics leadership-wise, I hope they engage us.
Yeah, I do too. We do appreciate you joining us. I want you to know next month we're going to be talking about being a listening leader. Another thing I want you to know is that we will be not only doing these talks back and forth, Chris and I, but we'll also be inviting local community leaders in to podcast with us every few months, men and women equally, to be able to share leadership insights and with you. And we're also going to be occasionally doing a book review to kind of dig into some of the nuances of leadership as others are presenting them to our culture and to our world. So look forward to that. But each episode will be between 20 and 25 minutes long. And we just hope that you'll like the Facebook. We'll hope you'll like the YouTube channel. Get others interested. Again, spread the word as much as you can. And thank you for being with us today. We've enjoyed this time. And so we'll say peace out to you. Thanks.
Yeah. Thanks for joining us.
Thank you for joining us for the Chris, Gregg, and Brook Reinoehl Leadership Podcast. Our episodes will be available on YouTube, Apple Podcast page of First Christian Church in Brazil, Indiana, and at fccbrazil.org. Each episode is only about 20 minutes long, and we will be tackling tough leadership topics, books, and interview local leaders in Western Indiana. Thank you for listening, and we will be back next month. And remember, the best way to lead others is to grow ourselves first. Thank you for joining us.